And we're speaking about tragedy in a sort of classical sense. And the book itself, its organization reflects a classical tragedy. It's organized into 3 main acts. And what are the core ingredients of a tragedy? Tragedies begin with what? With grand ambition. Even hubris is the start of tragedies. And the book documents how, prior to the pandemic, there were many voices that were saying that a sort of digital upheaval, a digital revolution in education was imminent, and that the internet and connected technologies will become the core. And we document those voices and that discourse, how strong that was before March 2020. And how optimistic people were that this paradigm shift was going to occur, and that COVID-19 and school closures would be the catalyst to sort of catapult us into this promising digital future. Act 2 of the book is the central drama of the story of our experiences, and that documents the ways that technology did not deliver on its lofty promises. And we look at all those different dimensions. And then finally, the purpose of a tragedy, and this is even going back to Aristotle and others, the purpose of a tragedy is learning and lessons, re-seeing things so we can see them better in the future. And that is the Act 3, is what lessons can we extract from this experience that will help us to build better futures for education going forward. So this metaphor of tragedy is really central to the book, and even central to its organization.
Thank you very much.
Is to suggest that things like better teacher training, better better sort of infrastructure around schools. I mean, all of us, or many of us, have visited schools where, I mean, students have a broken chair to sit on. They don't have a clear desk, but in many of those schools, they do have a Chromebook. Maybe it would make sense to, fix the windows and the ventilation in the school first, or the bathroom in the school first. So I think we're at this sort of very strange moment in development where there are literally ministries of education that are asking themselves, do we bring like plumbing and electricity to schools, or do we bring Chromebooks that can connect to mobile networks to schools? So sort of surreal, debate, but this is something that a lot of ministries are navigating and thinking through. And the evidence that we have seen suggests that you need to deal with some of those fundamental things first, and that the promises that technology will deliver all of these advantageous and beneficial results is not yet there. It may get there, but I haven't seen it yet. And in the book, there's I think for me personally, it was the most profound chapter, and it's about touch. It's about the importance of human touch. And we forget that a distant and remote learning experience with technology engages 2 human senses, visual and audio. We, as biological beings, have 5 senses. We have touch, we have taste, and we have smell. And we forget how connected those are to learning and how important they are to learning. And touch in particular, people who study touch say it is the most underappreciated sense. Humans need touch. They will forego food and drink for touch. Children in particular need touch. What do schools do? They provide a place where people do have this sort of positive touch through sports, through play, and through other things. And we saw tremendous psychosocial problems with children as a result of the pandemic, and I think as a result of the school closures, and a result of this prolonged reliance on distance learning solutions. So is touch central to education? If I go out in the street and say that, people are going to make a funny face. But it should be central to education. So, think back to your own education. How many of you remember dissection? I do. I really remember it. Frogs, cow eyes, even a pig we dissected. It was fantastic. Why do I remember it so well? I don't think it's because of what I saw. I think it's because of what I touched and what I smelled. There are virtual reality simulations that will allow you to dissect even a human being. It's not the same thing. Those virtual reality simulations with the hardware and the software combined, they can cost up to $2,000. Do you know how much a dead frog costs? I looked it up. $5. A cow eye costs under 10.
Context matters. And I don't hear any differences or nuances regarding context. For example, some approaches work for adult learners, or some approaches work for higher education compared with secondary education or primary education. Can you tell something about that?
It's a very important point you're making, and the book really tries to dismantle. We see conversations about EdTech like applied to education globally. It's like, how can technology change education? And by education, we mean like K through, post-secondary education. In the book, we try to observe there are massive, let's even talking about K through 12 education. There are massive differences between a first grader and an 11th grader. And there are massive differences in their capacity, ability to leverage technology for educational purposes. And so it's no mystery to me that in standard education systems, there's not very much technology that's used in the lower grades, and then gradually technology is more and more introduced. And now by the time many people get to post-secondary education, technology is often very, very central. People even do, remote degrees at universities and things. But there's a reason for that, and the book sort of traces that. But the importance of play and place-based education, physical education, using motor skills for young children is absolutely essential. So we want to kind of unmoor this discussion about EdTech from education generally and apply it more specifically to different age groups. The book has a section in it that observes that during the pandemic, like online kindergarten became a thing. Every educational specialist in the world was going, my God, those words are oxymorons. This is yet it did become something, and it became something that frankly was normalized during the pandemic. And now I think if we go out, again, our example, we go out on the street and we say online kindergarten, people's jaws will not drop in the same way they might have before the pandemic. But our point in the book is their jaws still should drop. That kindergarten is an undigitizable experience if it is to be educative and beneficial, I think. There's not a lot of evidence to suggest that big investments in technology are going to help you improve education in meaningful ways. But then there'll be somebody who'll go, but whoa, you're not talking about generative AI, because generative AI, that's entirely new. It is entirely new. And this is going to change everything, and we are at the threshold of an absolute paradigm shift in education, and everybody's going to have their own Oxford tutor at their fingertips, no matter where they live, and education is finally going to become sort of equal and universal, and everybody will have educational opportunities that we could only imagine 10 years ago. And so then the evidence people, take 10 years to kind of do their studies and publish all of their results, and often, at least in the past, what's happened is actually it didn't work out quite that way. And it didn't deliver what we had hoped. So you're always kind of playing catch up, and I think that's why it's important to the document. The book looks at sort of not only what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, but sort of past experiments to integrate technology into education and make digital tools the spine of education, and how those didn't work out in the past. The book opens actually with a quote it says, within 10, I forget it exactly, but it was something like within 10 years, schools and universities as we know them will cease to exist because of this new technology. And you think, wow, that was probably, I don't know, maybe that was Sam Altman or something said that, last week or 2 weeks ago. But actually that was Thomas Edison in 1913 talking about his motion picture machine. So these kind of visions that technology will completely upend education have been with us for a very, very long time. And we continue to come back to a human and school-based model, not because it's tired and old and it doesn't have any innovation. There are lots of innovations that happen in schools and universities. You may not see them if you just take a picture, but if you observe what's happening in those spaces, it's very different than what was happening 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But we somehow think that these technologies will usher in this, this kind of radically new world. But we keep going back to the human-based model because it's so effective. We dedicate a full chapter to what the implications of this are for the future. And I think those are very sharp and very actionable recommendations. And not a lot of fluffy stuff. I mean, real clear things that countries can do. Let me provide one example. We look at the right to education. What is the right to education? It's an aspiration. It's inscribed in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So, but what is it really? Really, it's a legal commitment from countries. It's written into laws and regulations. And when you look closely at those laws and regulations, they say that the right to education means certain things. What is never said in these laws and regulations is that schooling should be or must be a school-based experience. So if they say education needs to be provided 5 days a week, it was implicit at the time these laws were written that that would be a school-based experience. But now we've entered a possibility where it can be the government throws some content on a cloud, says that there's a system to provision devices and connectivity, and good luck, we have fulfilled our right to education. So one of the recommendations is to anchor the right to education in a right to schooling, and that would require sort of legislative things. So there are these concrete recommendations. I think, yes, we can do a better job to pull them out. Rest assured, there are summaries of the book in the book. There's a 1 and even 2-page summary there. But I think we can better highlight the key recommendations. A final point on this, and this may strike some people as being maybe even being a little hypocritical, I don't think it is we're using technology to help people to navigate this book. I don't know if people saw the announcement earlier this month. OpenAI released a utility where people can make their own GPTs. So I fed the GPT, it's a pretty laborious process. I fed the GPT the entire content of this book. I also trained it about which sections were most important and messages were most important. I spent a lot of time with it, working with it. I must say, it's an incredible tool. I don't much like the general ChatGPT. I find its answers to be sort of tired and cliche and other things. But when it's only using our material that I sort of fed it, I love its answers. And I'll ask it, what are the key recommendations? And it will give you a much sharper answer than I would give you here. My answer is sort of, falling all over the place and everything else. But then it uses its sort of ChatGPT, voice to be like, there are 5 main recommendations in this book, point 1, point 2, point 3. And then you see your own writing, right there after the thing. So maybe the future actually will be a tool like this. I don't want anybody to leave this thinking UNESCO is anti-technology. We are not at all. We want to observe what happened with technology, but I think there may be powerful ways to leverage technology to help people find the material in this book that they may be looking for and to ask the specific questions they have. And this tool has must say, a magical ability to surface what is relevant in response to their queries, using this book as the knowledge base.